What's happening, guys? This is Matt from Last Chance Bait and Tackle, Tackle.com, and Last Chance Performance Marine. You're probably reading the title of this thing going, The Franks and Beans Approach to Diamond Valley. What the heck are these guys at Last Chance Tackle talking about? Well, you got to think about it. This whole Periscope and everything we try to do is... someone's calling me. But anyway, everybody, this whole Periscope is based on keeping it simple. We don't want to give you all these topics and all this little crazy detail to confuse you on the water. So instead of meat and potatoes, we joke around between Anthony and I. We're always doing something different, something way far off base. So this is our Franks and Beans approach to Diamond Valley. And I'll get into that. But before I get into our main topic tonight about a couple of things that I'm doing on our local lake that will pertain to other areas of the nation, I want to talk a little bit about as you know, Last Chance Bait and Tackle and National Bass West are affiliated with Last Chance Performance Marine. The owners of both corporations have actually teamed up and started a boat shop. I don't need to really get into detail about that. But one key thing I did want to talk about that we've talked about in the past, and you may have seen pictures of me doing, is we took on the Skeeter boat lineup at the shop. We carry everything from the ZX190 all the way up to the FX21LE. And the cool thing about that is we are now certified dealers as well as certified on Yamaha outboards. So if you are running a Skeeter outboard or running a Yamaha or Skeeter boat or Yamaha outboard, feel free to come into Last Chance Performance Marine. We can definitely take care of you. In addition to the Skeeter lineup, we have Phoenix, we have Lund, and we have low boats. Everything from freshwater boats all the way to intercoastal and even bay boats. Low has a really nice center console boat that you might be interested in. And as well as Lund, they have some of their rough water boats available that actually can handle like Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, all those rough water areas. And the funny thing about it is most guys see a Lund boat or even a low boat as simply a freshwater boat. It's meant for lakes. It's meant for rivers. These boats are built to handle intercoastal and offshore fishing. You're not going to go too far. Obviously, you want to use common sense. But for most of the stuff we have to deal with around here, whether it be fishing Coronado Island, or not Coronado Island, but like fishing the bridge down in Coronado in San Diego Bay, you're fishing Mission Bay, Newport Beach, Long Beach Breakwell, all that kind of cool stuff, these boats can handle it. So if you ever have a chance to get down to Last Chance Performance Marine, I highly recommend it. If you want, you can even schedule a time where I can go over there and show you a little bit around the shop. Their phone number is 951-765-1800. So basically what I wanted to do is get into my Franks and Beans. So my two-part approach to Diamond Valley right now is, you guys have been reading about Diamond. Everybody's talking about, oh man, that bite is way cool. It's doing super, super good. Then all of a sudden it kind of sloughed off a little bit. I mean, that whole initial craze over Diamond Valley, our local lake that just opened back up, it kind of simmered down. Guys stopped catching 30, 40 fish a day like they claimed to. Now it got into that 8 to 10 fish. Some people are even saying, oh man, it got really tough, 1 to 2 fish. So I've been out there pretty steady on the new boat, and I've been really, really trying to break down the puzzle and unlock larger fish. So I've been through everything. As much as I didn't want to do it, I drop shot it. I've thrown Senkos. I've thrown the jig. I've thrown the big worm. I've even thrown a little bit of swim baits. And I've wanted to see, okay, where are these fish? What stage are they in? And what are they doing? So one thing I did to ease the whole process, and so I had to go back to basics, because unlike a lot of people, my first day out there wasn't so hot. My second day out there was mediocre, wasn't up to par to my standards. The third trip out there, I started figuring it out. And the fourth trip and the fifth trip, I really started breaking them down. So what I did was I found out there's two parts of the water column these fish are going to be hanging at. You have your upper level fish, you have your bottom level fish. You have your beans, and you have your Franks. So on the upper level fish, what I started figuring out is, okay, those fish are relating to some sort of bait. As water's rising, bluegill, silver sides, rush the bank. Okay, we had a class of fish that was up in the trees that was mowing down bluegill, mowing down silver sides. Those were in turn the same fish that were eating our Yamamoto Senkos, our flukes, our small underspins. And a lot of people didn't really put that whole message and piece of the puzzle together. They simply went down the lake and just threw and threw and threw, and they caught fish. They caught 10, they caught 12, they caught 15, without really going, okay, what can I do different to upsize my fish? So what I did was I was listening. I was very observant, because I'm sitting here going like, man, I know I'm better than this. My first day out there, I had like 10 fish. I'm sitting here going like, this is the first day back on Diamond. I should have had 20, 30 fish. it's supposed to be stupid. It's supposed to be crazy. So I started observing, listening, and going, okay, how can I get this small bait forage to equal larger fish? So what I did was, most guys were throwing the cool baits, the down underspin. One of the best underspins on the market. I urge you guys to look into them. Very, very close to the Swarm and Hornet we were all, familiar with. This is upgraded. It has a bait keeper on it. It's more tapered to the baits that we're going to fish. So I was saying, to me, I'm not really much of a finesse guy. I'm not a small bait guy. I like to fish for 5 bites. I don't want to fish for 25 bites. I want big fish, and I want to figure out how I can do it. So in my own little world, I'm like, okay, how can I put a bigger bait on the back of an underspin? Obviously, if you look at that hook, I can't put a 5, 6, 7 inch bait on the back of that underspin. I'm going to have to look for something else that will accept it. So what I actually started searching around is I found the Blade Runner Spin Tricks right here. Very, very cool bait. And I'm like, okay, that accepts a bigger bait. It has like a 4/0 hook in some of the sizes, even 5/0, 6/0 in others. Bigger blade, heavier heads. I'm in the 3/8 ounce category, the 1/2 ounce category. When I was cruising down the lake, I was on a good crankbait bite early on, but I was catching small fish. They were that 0 to 10 foot stuff. So I kind of went, okay, well, larger fish probably aren't on the bank. They're going to be out in that 15, 20, 25 foot zone. So I started metering around. I started finding fish. I was throwing these, but I struggled getting down to these fish. I couldn't keep it in the strike zone long enough with the wind at my back going down the banks. So I had to impart a heavier head. So what I did was, okay, I want to throw a bigger bait. I know they're eating bluegill 3 to 5 inches long. I started picking up the Blade Runner underspin just like this. Much larger profile, matching the size of the bluegill as opposed to the cool bait. That's more of a finesse type bait. It catches large fish, but this one right here appealed more to the larger fish because it was the same size as the forage they're feeding on. As Anthony says in all of his Periscope episodes, and I even beat it up and tell you guys, match the hatch. If they're eating bigger baits, throw a bigger bait. If they're eating smaller baits, throw a smaller bait. So I'm sitting over here. The first day I tested it out, I was throwing the swim bait. I was throwing the Gancraft 178. I'm going down the dam like, man, this isn't the part of the water column these fish are hanging at. I can't get a fish to commit. So I took a bait like this, wung it out to deep water, 25 foot of water, allowed it to sink to the bottom, ripped it off the bottom, boom, 3.5 pound fish immediately. I'm like, that's the kind of fish I'm looking for. A couple casts later, 4 pound fish. I started putting together a good bag. So basically what I'm trying to do with this right here is I'm trying to give the fish a bigger meal. And one thing that I've been doing with it, like I showed you in a couple different sizes, because I am fishing 25 foot of water predominantly on Diamond Valley, I know the bluegill are a little bit deeper in the column. I'm going to opt for more of a 3/8 to a 1/2 ounce size, just like this right here. That will help me get down in the water column fast enough, but not too fast. One thing I'll often do is I'm going to pitch that bait out there, and I'll pitch that bait out there on long casts, and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to tight line my reel as opposed to stuff I talked about in previous ones. Click it out there. When I tight line that reel and I add tension to that bait's not sinking straight down. It's coming down at an angle. While it's coming down at an angle, I got the kick of my tail, which I'll talk about, as well as the blade naturally spinning. So I'm covering from the cast to the touchdown of the water, the whole part of the water column. That's allowing me to pick apart top, middle, bottom where these fish are hanging out at. So I'll throw it out there, allow it to hit the water. I'll let it fall back down. I'll snap it up off the bottom. Rip. What that'll do is it'll flare that bait. It'll come up, dart left, dart right. Spinner blade, trailing behind. So a lot of times my reaction right there is enough to trigger these fish to feed. So if I don't get bit, what I'm going to be doing is allow it to sink down there, rip. I'll sit there and start turning the handle nice and slow. I'm trying to trace the bottom like Anthony did say in previous Periscopes with the spy bait. I want to keep that bait swimming at a horizontal plane. I don't want it slowly tracking up because that's not natural. If I was a bluegill or if I were to be underwater imagining how a bluegill swim, he's going to swim down around rocks. He's going to keep himself as concealed as he possibly can. He doesn't want to get eaten. If he comes up off the bottom, he's in open water. He's in a zone where the predators are going to eat him. So I take very, very, very careful consideration to what my bait's doing. The closer I get to the boat, the slower down I swim that bait because my upward angle is going to allow that bait to come up. So before I get too caught up in how to fish this bait or the gear, the line, the reels, whatever, I want to show you what I have on the back of this bait. Obviously, there's your underspin right there. It's nothing fancy. It's kind of an ugly bait, but it gets the job done and it catches a lot of fish. The cool thing about the Blade Runner underspin that's different from most other underspins that Sean Cooley actually, caught on to in his design with his, is the way his swivel comes out of his head right here. It keeps that blade down and out away from the bottom of your trailer. A lot of underspins come off a little too high, and they actually touch and they rub and they hinder this blade from spinning. Very, very cool design, as well as the longer shank hook right there. It allows me to fish a bigger bait. Now, right here, what you see on here, this is a Kitech. This one's actually a 4.8 in a color called Smallmouth Magic. And this is a color I was throwing mainly because I found some clear water at Diamond Valley where these fish were hanging at. And I was looking at the bait and looking at the color in the water. This actually stood out the best to the water clarity. And one thing I like to do that's different from most people want their baits to stand out in the water column. I want my baits to blend into the water column. Fish by nature blend into their surroundings. If it's shad or if it's bass, you've seen largemouth come out of muddy lakes. They don't have vibrant colors. They have that muddy look to them, that dusty look to them. It's just part of their environment. So why would I have, if it's part of their environment at Diamond Valley Lake, it's dirty water for a long period of time, why would I make my bait stand out to these fish? Yes, I want to attract fish to bite, but a lot of times I want to blend my baits in to make it look more realistic. So if you didn't want to use a Kitech, I know these things have been in high demand for a long period of time. Very hard to find these baits. There's other baits. It doesn't have to only be a Kitech bait. You have dippers right here. As you can see, I'm going to pull one out. This is the thing a lot of people struggle with. They get locked in, a lot of tournament guys especially, and I mean, I'm the same way. If I'm getting bit on a bait, I have to have that bait. But if a fish is going to bite this bait right here, he will certainly bite this bait right here. I may chop it down to size accordingly, but that bait right there, you still have a dark back, a light bottom. It has a dark back, a light bottom, both shades of green. If you're getting bit on this, you can still drum up bites on this. It doesn't have to be identical colors like we all think it has to be. Now, for instance, this thing does have a boot tail right here. It's going to affect and it's going to swim the same way as this guy. You can even go to one of my favorite baits that I fish a lot of. It's the Megabass Spark Shad right here. And I'm going to pull one out so you can see it. And the cool thing, ever since I saw this bait, I was intrigued by it because some of my favorite baits of the past are line-through baits like the Osprey swim bait, bigger baits. And this thing's almost spot on to an Osprey swim bait. All you have to do, pop this thing out. And one cool thing I want to show you with this particular underspin is it has a keeper right here. It holds your baits on a lot longer. So I'm going to rig this bait up for you right now. I'm actually going to buy this bait. But you're going to rig this thing up just like that. Some baits will actually go on there with the underspin. But you're going to put that bait just like this. You saw me with the Kitech bait on there. Now you're going to see me with this bait. You cannot tell me that a fish is going to opt for this more than this. It's the same basic bait. And for that matter, you add this bait into the equation. You're moving these baits at a moderate speed, fast enough where these fish, have to track it, have to chase it. You're giving it direction chase. You're creating reaction strikes. You're going to be able to catch fish on all through this bait. So if you ever find yourself in need of finding a bait like a Kitech bait, oh man, everybody's sold out. What am I going to do? I'm going to have to glue my baits back together. You can find stuff similar, and these are 3 different baits that actually work out. And now, as I'm fishing these particular baits, I'm keeping close consideration on obviously my forage. If I'm dealing with shad, I'm going to throw baits in the color of a shad. It's going to be simple like this. If I'm dealing with baby bass or bluegill, I'm going to throw baits the shades of baby bass or bluegill. So it just so happens right now with Diamond Valley, we have a lot of bluegill. I'm catching a lot of my bass with bluegill tails sticking out of their throat. And it was cool the other day, we actually pulled one out and we had about that much of a bluegill with a big freaking tail coming out of a 3-pounder's throat. And it kind of opened my eyes. I was like, hey, why am I throwing a Senko or a little tiny darterhead, a little tiny underspin if they're eating baits this big? So while I'm throwing this, you heard me talk about fishing 3/8 half-ounce sizes. I'm going to be throwing it on a standard medium heavy to heavy action rod. I want a little bit of tip, but I also want a lot of backbone. I'm making a long cast, so I have a lot of line out there. Like I said, I'm going to sit there, click it into gear, allow that bait to pendulum and hit the bottom. Once it hits the bottom, rip, rip. I'm going to start my retrieve. A lot of times I'll put it in free spool, let it hit back to the bottom, and slowly wind it across the bottom. I'm sitting here observing that bait. If I feel a thump, twitch, twitch, I'll give it a direction change. I'll make it look alive. That bait's swimming like this. If I run into, let's say this is a rock right here. If I run into that rock, these fish are positioned around that structure like that. I run into a rock, twitch, twitch. That right there makes it look as if these bass have accomplished their goal. They know they've hid in concealment, and they see that bait coming out, freaking out, looking like that bait saw them. They're going to react positively. A lot of my fish will come after direction change. And I've showed a lot of this bait, and the one thing about me is I really don't care. I will give you every bit of my bite because I have zero fear of showing you guys what I use. It doesn't affect my bite one bit. It doesn't affect my fish catching ability. I'm going to give you what I catch fish. I think it's cool. I want you guys to have fun, and that's one big thing a lot of people kind of shy away from me sometimes on is they think I'm feeding them a lot of crap. But I'm always there to help you guys, and I want to show that you guys can catch them too. I'm not doing anything special. I suck just like anything. You know, I catch fish here and there. That's cool, whatever. But I'm going to do this right here. So being that I have a heavier bait, I need a stiffer rod to actually give it the movement down deep that's needed. I need to pop it off the bottom. That's cool stuff. Having a softer tip rod, I'm not allowed to do that. The rod loads up too much. I don't feel the bait as well. When I do hook a fish at a long distance, I need a heavy enough rod where I can jam that hook into that fish. I got a single hook just like this right here. That single hook is very, very hard to set at long distances. So a heavier rod like this one, this is a Megabass Levante. It's called a Diablo Spec R. Very, very good reaction bait rod. Soft in the tip, a lot of backbone, very, very good spinnerbait, chatterbait, and underspin type rod. I have it paired up with a 7-to-1 Abu Garcia Revo SX. Big fan of Abu Garcias. They've been really, really good to me over the years. Very little maintenance, great free spool, and heavy, heavy drag. So having a high gear ratio reel, heavy action rod, allows me to put a hook in a fish a long distance and then wind down for a bite. Makes it very, very fun for me. This has been a really good bite. I actually took Anthony Driscoll out there behind the camera, and we had an amazing morning one day. It was just like bite.
Yeah, it was pretty epic. It was definitely an eye opener on the bigger baits when everybody was going small. It was cool.
A lot of times you catch small. There's times you catch big, but when you kind of break into that wheelhouse of what these fish are truly doing, that's when special things can happen. And a big thing for me is I never settle. I'm not going to sit there and milk a bite to the end of times. I'm going to constantly figure out how to make it better. So this has been, like, on the overcast days we've had, the windy days, the days that people seem to somewhat struggle. They couldn't quite put the pieces together. This is what I was doing. I was on the motor on high, looking for offshore structure spots, points, ridges. I'm looking for grass, all that kind of stuff, edge spots. And all I'm doing, like I said, I'm paralleling that stuff. And I'm covering as much water as I can in the quickest amount of time to figure out where these fish are.
Because you're running and you're trying to keep this bait down in the water column where it's supposed to, are you running straight fluorocarbon? You going braid to leader? You running mono? What are you doing with this type of setup?
Okay, basically what I'm going to do, I can run braid to leader, I can run fluoro, or I can run mono. I want to keep this bait down, okay? But one thing that I'm doing right now, it's a little bit different. I need a little bit more buoyancy. So I'm actually opting for monofilament, and I'm actually fishing 15-pound test. Now, you're probably looking at me like, Diamond Valley, 15-pound mono? There's no way that you're going to get bit. For me, 15-pound mono has a little bit more float effect. When I cast that bait out there, click it into gear on the fall, my bait's not sinking with my line. My line's not adding any more drag. The reason why I opt for 15-pound tests, not only for the fall, is actually for bottom. As I'm fishing it across the bottom, and I'm slow winding as slow as I am, I don't want my line to sink too much into the cover. I happen to be fishing the dams right now on Diamond Valley. Heavy, heavy rock. And I'm fishing a lot of ups and downs. I'm fishing kind of weird compared to most people. I don't want my line really draping across that. Yes, fluorocarbon is a sinking line, better for bottom situation, more abrasion resistance. But I find for me in this circumstance, everything is very, very tight with my monofilament. And it's worked out for me. I tried it with the fluoro. It was cool and all, but the mono seemed to work out pretty well for me. Now, as I'm going down the lake, I'm just kind of keeping my eye. I'm looking for birds. I'm looking for bait. I'm looking for life. I know a lot of my fish right now are off the bank. They're in 20 foot of water, 25 foot of water. So I'm thinking back to my logs that I preached to you guys about. I'm looking for logs. And I'm sitting there going, okay, well, I know in the morning my fish are going to be generally shallow. They're going to be in that upper half of the column from that 5, 10 all the way out to that 20-foot zone. I can approach them with this. But what happens when the sun comes up? That's always been my struggle sometimes, is I get on a really good bite before I come to work, and all of a sudden it just shuts down. 9, 10, 12 o'clock. We all struggle. That's the dead time on Diamond Valley. Well, if you use common sense and you really, really think about what's happening is, under the cloak of darkness, early in the morning. Those bass are just like in nighttime. They're up shallow feeding on that bluegill, that shad, that inland silverside, those crawdads on the bank. As the sun comes up, they have eyes on top of their head. As the sun comes up, it starts beating down on them. Those fish are going to retreat out to deeper water under the security of shade and all that kind of stuff. They're going to seek out deeper water structure spots in accordance to their shallow water feeding flats. So right now, rather than go to Diamond Valley and go, okay, well, I have a morning spot, it's in the back of that cove over there, do you really think that all those fish that you found, all those 4, 5, 6 pounders that were feeding on topwater chatterbaits or buzzbaits in the back of a cove, you think they're going to leave that whole cove, drive, or swim across that bay across the lake to go park on a rock pile? No, they're going to stay in the close vicinity of that whole area. They're not going to leave a food source. I don't care if it's sun, wind, rain, whatever. They're going to stay in close vicinity to their food source. So one thing with me, because I am fishing in accordance to rock piles, points, the dams with structures on them, I'm going to think to myself, okay, I'm going to back off the bank a little bit. So this is basically the beans part of our Franks and Beans right
Keeping
here.
it small.
Keeping it small. You keep it bite-sized. You match the hatch. They're feeding on small fin bait up to that size. I'm going to throw baits up to that size. Now, when I know those bigger females are going to be the first to retreat out to deeper water, what I'll do is I'll find those spots and think about where is my spot on spot. And you've heard this in plenty of different videos, magazines, all this little detail type stuff. A spot on spot is that key rock on the outer edge of a structure spot that is the biggest potential area. So say I'm going to actually, okay, let's just do this real quick. Say this is my, it's going to be kind of hard to understand, but say this is my general hump right here, okay? There's always one significant spot on any spot. That is called the spot on spot. That's the best possible feeding opportunity spot in that area. So it could be a rock pile. It could be a tree sticking up. It could be a ladder, a rope, or something like that. It's where the biggest fish is going to actually take that spot and make it his own. So it just so happens, what I always look for to find my spot on spots, I look for the deepest side to any structure I'm fishing. Structure's the bottom of the lake. That's the rock pile. That's the point. That's the creek channel. I look for the deepest edge. Breaks off in the deepest water the fastest. And I look for any significant cover on that deep water drop-off. It could be a tree. It could be a rock. And I pay close attention to that spot. That's going to be where that biggest fish is going to be, because the first and foremost, big fish love security. They love deep water access. If they're intruded on, they have, a guy comes in their boat, carp come by, they want to be able to dip out in the quickest amount of time because they don't want to get, bugged with. They don't want to get messed with. They're big. They're wise. They've been around the block. They don't need to be in the hustle and bustle anymore. So what I'm doing is I have that for the morning hours. When I dip out to these spots, I want to probe these spots as slow as I can. I know that I have to slow down whether I like to or not. So the second approach, the Franks part, is my big worms. It's throwing 9 to 10-inch plastic worms, generally 8 to 10-inch plastic worms. And that's a big part of my routine right now. And you have seen a couple pictures I posted holding up these nice bass or whatever. They were good quality. When I figured that part out, that, hey, there's big fish that were up on the bank, they moved out, I started catching greater numbers of that 4 to up to 8 pound fish on a bite that people are like, oh man, I can't catch anything over 4 pounds. So when I go into my plastic worm fishing, I keep it extremely simple. If Anthony can come over here, you may think that I have this whole store to choose from. If I can't operate out of a box with 4 colors, I am doing something wrong. I have my greens, I have my browns, I have my variations of browns and purples, and I have my purples. I have everything for all color parts, all parts and clarity types. This right here, watermelon copper, and I don't care. I'll show you my actual box. It doesn't matter to me. This is an old color my dad had poured back in the day, a long time ago. Smitty's. It's going back to AA, Smitty's, Intimidator, all that kind of stuff. Here's my variation of, Margarita Mutilator. I don't throw Margarita Mutilator. I throw a variation of it. It's more Morning Dawn and Brown. Then I have my favorite, Trusty Black Grape. If I can't operate off of this box, I ain't catching fish. Simple as that. So when you go and pick your big worm colors, a lot of people figure, oh, I need to have this color, this color, this color. Keep it simple. Think about your water clarity. Think about the lakes you're fishing, and then operate off of that. You have your craw colors. You have your bluegill colors, and you have colors that, I don't know why they eat that color, but they it gets bit. It's my favorite confidence color.
And that's one of my most hated colors. That's the cool thing about fishing is he has his confidence, we have our confidence. You just got to stick with what is your confidence.
That's fact of the matter. These right here are all poured by Josh Upton at Upton's Customs. I really like his plastic. It's nice, firm plastic. He has good colors, and when I say I want this worm, that little knucklehead will pour me that worm, and it's spot on. He's done really good for me over the years. I can't say enough about him. But you can fish any worm you want. I don't care. You could throw a Raider worm.
What box are these right here?
These ones are actually Flambeau boxes. I just picked them up, and I'm kind of testing them right now just to see, because I've always been the kind of person that would have a big, giant box that all my worms are in here. But I just started kind of, with the new Skeeter, I'm kind of sitting there going, I can't really put these massive, giant boxes in there because it's not efficient for me. I have a nice boat. I want to make it clean and organized. So I started taking my worms out of individual bags. These right here, I have probably 50 to 60 worms in each of these boxes right here. These are actually the 8-inch. These are the 9-inch right here. I've been going through a lot of 9-inch lately. But a long box like this allows me to store them with no fear, just like that. Shake them around. They're still in their right spot. I'm actually very, very happy with these boxes. But a Plano box, a Flambeau, these are actually Flambeaus. If you give me a minute or contact me tomorrow, I can actually tell you the exact model number for you to purchase them on Tackle.com. You'll be able to see them on there. Very, very cool boxes. But I operate off a small little category of worms, and I keep it simple. That's the big thing for me. If I can't get bit, like I said, I'm probably not going to get bit on a big worm. So it's very, very simple. You can throw bass chow. Bass chow, Stefan makes a very, very, very good worm. It's a very soft worm. I like bass chow worms more for wintertime conditions. It's a very delicate, soft plastic where I can sit there and really slow down, really quiver a worm, and allow this worm to do everything its own. In the summer months, I favor more Uptons right here. They're a little stouter, stiffer worm. I know I can go through multiple fish. I can make bomber casts with these worms without the fear of them ripping off the back of my hook. And that's a big thing. One reason why I favor Uptons over a lot of other worms is because I can abuse these plastics, catch numerous fish on them, and they still hold, and I can still get more for a bait. So when I'm Texas rigging, big thing I'm doing right now, I have two different types of Texas rig rods. And yes, for those of you that have been around a time or two, can notice these are Chronarch 50 MGs. Some of the best Texas rig reels I find of all time. And I have two different types of Texas rig rods. I have my 8-inch worm rod, and I have my 9 and 10-inch worm rod. Now, for the 8-inch worm rod, I like something a little bit softer in the tip. This is actually a Megabass X4, but you don't have to quite. It's called a Black El Side, or El Seal. This rod right here, if you can pan off the tip, it's a super soft tip, but it shuts down on the bottom end. This particular rod right here, I can sit out there, and there's a technique. You can even look at my license plate, and that's what it really means. It's called worm doodler. Everybody's like, oh, worm doodler, what's this guy doing in the back of his truck? But what that entails is one method my dad taught me back in the day to shake plastic worms. Because I am throwing a smaller, skinnier plastic worm, you're talking this little guy right here. It looks small, but it's an 8-inch worm. I can sit there, and one thing I like to do is I have to hold the rod in my right hand. I grab the line. That way I can feel what my bait's doing. And I'll sit there and I'll shake that worm, and I bet you Rich is on there probably talking crap right now because he always loves that worm doodler business. But anyway, grab that line and shake that rod tip just like this. That's where that doodling comes in. You're just shaking along. You're having a good
worm
old time.
Doodling. It's real to doodle.
Worm doodling. So you shake it just like that. All you're trying to do is move the weight, but not the actual worm itself. You just want that tail to quiver. And after I get done talking about this worm business, I'm going to take you over the tank and show you that it's not just me making up some Franks and Beans mumbo jumbo. So you just start shaking that worm around there. If I have too stiff of a rod, what I find myself doing is allowing myself to move that bait too much. I want to quiver just similar to a drop shot. Imagine a drop shot in the back of your head. You're not trying to really move that weight and that whole rig. You want to quiver that drop shot's tail. Same things with this. You're picking apart a piece of structure. You're picking apart your spot on spot. You're throwing, you're shaking it. I always have that line. When I do get bit by having line out like this, you'll shake. Thump, thump. You can drop your rod tip. You just gave that fish 12 to 15 inches of line, if not a foot. Drop your rod tip, allow that fish to take line, reel back, set the hook. Very important with the softer tip rods to basically allow that bait to, to shake and to doodle. So let's say I'm not fishing. Like right now I'm fishing more 9-inch worms. Obviously, the weight of a 9-inch worm plus that long cast, I need a rod that's a little bit stiffer than my 8-inch worm rod. I am fishing, Chronic 50 MGs. My lighter 8-inch worm rod, I'm going to spool it with 8-pound test, generally. When I move up to my bigger worm rod, my 9-inch worm rod, and I'm going to talk about weights and hooks and all that kind of stuff in a second, I want something a little bit more meaty. This right here is a 743 C. It's a Dobbins Extreme. It's the HP. I just picked this one up just recently because I wanted to check it out. This used to be one of my absolute favorite Texas rig rod. It still has that same tip, but it has a heck of a lot more backbone than my 8-inch worm rod. I have a bigger chunk of plastic. I need a rod that's going to penetrate that plastic and put that hook in the corner of that fish's face. And the same thing. I'm going to worm doodle with this. I'm throwing a bigger, meatier plastic worm. When I make a long cast, I don't want the weight of that bait to overpower the tip of that rod. I want to be able to pull it over cover. Too soft of a rod, I'm going to find myself hanging up. It's just not going to make things fun. So on the bigger worm rod, obviously I like to keep it around, both worm rods, over 7 foot. I like something in the neighborhood of 7'4", 7'3". It just suits my style. Longer rods, end of a long cast, if you get bit, you can pull more inches per hook set than you can with a shorter rod. I'm fishing stuff in the neighborhood of a 5 to 6 to 1 gear ratio reel. And on the bigger worm rod, I opt for 10 to 12 pound tests. I do prefer fluorocarbon. It's a slower technique. It's a bait where a fish is going to sit there and analyze that bait coming across that bottom. So yeah, fluorocarbon will actually help in my approach to fishing this. It's a much slower technique like a drop shot. Now, when it comes to the terminal tackle aspect of the big worm itself, I keep things really simple, and this is going back to my roots. When I was young, like, 6, 7 years old, my dad would only take me fishing. I've told you guys before. He'd only take me fishing in the winter months. Take me down to San Vicente in the winter. I wouldn't get to fish the spring, wouldn't get to fish the fun bite. He'd take me in the winter, grab me a Texas rig rod, 1/8 ounce bullet weight, and a 6-inch curl tail plastic worm, and tell me to let her rip. We're fishing 50, 60 foot of water, and he's making me feel the bottom. Now, I'm a little kid. I'm 6, 7 years old. How am I going to feel that bottom? So he wouldn't take any crap. He'd sit there, figure it out, make it happen, figure it out. So I'd sit there, and I really started understanding the weight of my bait. So one thing that's actually kind of, a lot of it's based on pressure, feeling the bottom. So one thing that stuck with me is to stay as light as I can go. The lighter your weight. I didn't understand the lessons until I was getting older. If you keep your weight size as light as possible, you're making a more natural approach, a natural look on the bottom. It's more of that float effect. You throw a live crawdad in the water, he doesn't sink to the bottom like a rock. He kind of floats. He gets down there. Eventually he's going to hit the bottom. He's going to crawl around, and it's almost like he's floating on the bottom. So I want to go with weights anywhere from 3/16, sometimes down to 1/8 ounce still, 3/16, quarter, at the very heaviest. If it's windy conditions, I may opt for a 3/8, but not as much as I used to anymore. I'm going to opt for more of that 3/16 and quarter ounce bullet weight in most situations when I'm fishing out to 40 foot of water. So because I am quivering that bait across the bottom and I'm shaking just like this, I'm trying to make it look like a crawdad kind of floating across that bottom. Having a light weight and all that kind of good stuff allowed me to come across cover a lot better. And obviously, one thing, that you should already know, I don't got to preach it in the back of your head. Before I do that, I actually particularly like the Rains weights. I don't know if you guys have seen these weights. A lot of the pros, Brent Erler, a lot of these guys are fishing these Rains weights. They're a really, really nice weight. Very compact weight right here. And one thing you can see, I put a bobber stopper on there. I like my weight and my worm to come over cover in one uniform piece. I don't like to sit there and be shaking my weight and lift it up and have my weight on one side of a bush, worm on the other, and I'm feeling that pressure. I hate that. So what I'll do is I'll insert a decoy right here, a Texas lock, which is just a bobber stopper. I'll put it on there ahead of my line. And I always give myself a little bit of room, just like that, where that weight can move freely. As I'm coming over the bottom, that weight can click and clack and allow that worm to move and shift off into different positions. Makes it really nice, but I really think you guys ought to look at those Rains weights. Very, very, very cool weights. I dig them more than I like the Picassos, and I used to be a big Picasso fan. When it comes to my hooks on my baits, match your hook to the size of the bait you're fishing, just like saltwater. You're throwing a small bait, throw a small hook. You're throwing a big bait, you're throwing a big hook. One thing I find is I really like, let me actually pull this bait out here. I really like the Gamakatsu rebarbs, Roboworm rebarb hooks, just like this. And I'm going to fish a hook that matches it. I might be down to a 1/0 when I'm throwing my 8-inch worm, my smaller worm. But when I'm actually fishing my larger worms, sometimes I'll go up to what I have right here. This is a 4/0 hook right here. And the cool thing about these rebarbs, if you haven't fished them before, is I'm going to show you how cool these rebarbs really are. You're going to insert that hook point in the head of the worm, just like this. So it's flush. You're going to come out the belly at a 90, just like this. You're going to slide that worm up the shank of the hook. And the rebarb hooks have a little keeper right here. And I'm going to show you what that actually does. You might already know. We talked about it in previous periscopes. You slide the worm up over the shank, just like that, and you slide it out so that keeper pops out. My line's in the way. See that keeper right there? Hopefully you can see it. I'm going to slide that worm back so that keeper stops up against the plastic of the plastic worm. I'm going to insert my hook back into the belly of the bait as straight as possible, just like this. The thing about that keeper is we've all been there, throwing old school worm hooks. I make my cast as far as I can. My worm's going to slide down my shank of the hook, and it sucks, as you got to cut that worm off or bite the head off, grab another worm. When you make a bomber cast with that rebarb hook, that rebarb prevents that worm from sliding down that hook. You have to actually pull to get that worm to slide down that hook. It makes it so when you're fishing on a lightweight in windy days and you're making that bomber cast, you're not going to cast your worm off. You're not going to have to go through a ton more plastic. So definitely match your hooks to the size of the, size of the bait you're fishing, all that kind of good stuff. But there you have it. I mean, this periscope was kind of a little off base compared to other periscopes. I wanted to kind of give you some information behind some products, at the same time kind of tell you what I'm doing at Diamond Valley. I have a 1-2 approach right now for Diamond Valley. Okay, that's our local lake, obviously just opened. I'm throwing my bait-oriented stuff in the morning. I'm going to be throwing my underspins. I'm going to look and capitalize on a quick bite. I know they're up feeding bluegill. I'm going to throw a bait like this, and this allows me to cover the surface of the water column down to 20 feet of water. I can get a quick bite going with this. Let's say that sun came up, fish moved off the bank. I know where these spots where they should be moving, those rock piles adjacent to early morning feeding flats, all that kind of stuff. I can then methodically pick them apart with a Texas rig plastic worm. And for you guys that are actually local to us and are thinking about fishing Diamond Valley, the worm bite is on to the point where it's stupidity.
See, we got a couple customers that want to see your doodling technique in the tank.
Oh, you want to watch me doodle?
You want to shake your doodle in the tank real
Shake
quick.
my doodle in the dangle?
Show these guys how these worms act once
Okay.
rigged with tungsten and the rebarbs and all that good stuff.
All right, let's go doodle the doodle. Okay, let me just rig this up.
Go
We're gonna
shake
walk
some
over-
doodles real quick.
Shake some franks and beans. Get snazzy over here. Okay, let's walk over to the tank and see if I can hook a catfish. Megan,
Yeah,
yes,
they're already
I
calling
did.
it. They're already calling
Let's,
for it.
I want to see some catfish action going. Pow!
That's right.
Shake and bake. All right, kitty fish. All right, kitty fish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to anticipate my spot. And there I got my delicate plastic worm right there. I'm going to allow that worm to sink on the bottom. As you can tell, Upton's Customs, his plastic floats. So on the initial fall, my worm's standing up. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to quiver that worm. I'm going to shake the weight and try not to move that worm. At rest, watch the tail of that worm. It'll start to float up. That's actually, there it goes. It'll start to float up. And as I'm fishing, I'm envisioning that tail floating up. Think about a crawdad. He's defensive. He's kind of cruising. He's doing this number. You want to make it look alive. And you pop it, allow that worm. Let me actually get out of the corner. So you're going to sit and hit the bottom just like that. I'm going to quiver that across the bottom. Allow that worm to float back up. Those fish know it's there. You just allow it to look natural. Just creep it across the bottom. Allow the worm to do what it wants to do. I'm not even shaking that worm. It's moving by itself. Underwater currents on any lake are going to make these worms do interesting things. Look at the weight. I'm not even shaking anything. But look how those fish come down to it.
See?
They're
See?
naturally curious about that. Anglers tend to overwork their baits. And this is one thing when you're fishing Texas rig, you're fishing the doodle technique. You just shake the worm enough to make it look a little natural. You let the fish make up their own mind. You'll see that fish come back again. I'm just going to sit here and shake it just like this. Allow that worm to float back up. A lot of times, that's when you get bit. So if you pan over to me, I'm going to show you. You saw how that worm was acting. If you look at how I'm going to shake that worm, I just have that rod in my hand. I have the line in my fingers just like this. And I'm just shaking that rod tip. Now, show the rod tip if you can, Anthony. I don't know.
Actually, let me get from behind you.
I don't know if you can see that rod tip to see just how much I'm moving. I'm not moving it very much. I'm talking 1 to 3 inch pops, nice and easy. And you'd be amazed how much that bait's working across the bottom. If I get bit, I'm going to drop my line, point my rod tip at the bait, allow that fish to pull line off. Wind down, crack them, set the hook. So it's very, very simple technique. It was taught to me years ago with my dad. My dad's a long-time, San Diego tournament angler, and he grew up fishing against Don Ivino, Mike Folpstad, all those guys. And he grew up in San Diego's heyday of worm fishing, all those deep structure guys. And he's taught me a lot of the old school, and I just blended a little with the new school to find my own 5-bite technique. And he's a 25-bite guy. I'm a 5-bite guy. I'd rather catch big ones. He'd rather just catch a bunch. So I'm trying to develop my own system with this, whether it be the spin or the big worm, to help me locate 5 solid bites. So with these little tips and tricks, hopefully you see me out in Diamond Valley. Stop by the Skeeter. You can't miss it. It's black and neon green with neon green power pole sticking up.
Cricket boat.
It's the Cricket leg boat, Green Hornet. So if you see me out there, pull up on me. I don't care. I'll be more than happy to show you exactly what I'm doing. I'll show you my box. I'll even hand you my rod to cast as long as you don't backlash it. Because I want to use it the rest of the day.
And he fishes them wide open, too.
I have no fear. I don't care if you know what I'm throwing. Right now I'm throwing a lot of crawdad color baits as far as my big worms go. A lot of my bass right now are spitting up crawdads in my live wells. So I'm matching the hatch, fishing more of a crawdad pattern. Seem to be getting better bites. I'm getting a lot of fish in that 3.5 to 5 pound range. With one I had just recently, just under 8 pounds. So very, very cool little thing right there. Definitely get on that bite. Diamond Valley changes, so definitely get on it while it's still there. I'm fiending right now. I can't go fish until Saturday. I'm freaking out. So, but again, give Last Chance Performance Marine a shot. We got Skeeter, like I said, over there. We do a lot of cool things. Give us here a call at lastchancetackle.com. That's pretty much it. Thank you for your business. We look forward to helping you guys become better anglers.
Appreciate you guys tuning in. Like Matt was saying, any calls, 951-658-7410. Can either talk to me or Matt, especially picking his brain about this technique.
Got
and
doodles and doodles.
Yes, doodling those worms.
And hey, just so you guys know, we're freshwater guys. We're saltwater guys too. Just so you know what's going on offshore right now. We got a lot of... we have a lot of big tuna coming up the line right now. We got
some
fish
epic
over
stuff
200
happening.
pounds, okay? We have a couple trips available still at lastchancetackle.com, Last Chance Bait and Tackle, on the Pride of the Seaforth Landing. Give us a call, Last Chance Bait and Tackle, 658-7410. Talk to us about it because you have a shot at history this year. I mean, we had some good tuna years, yellowfin tuna. But I will guarantee you we will probably never see bluefin tuna fishing of this caliber fish over 150 to 200 pounds on 3/4 day boats.
It's getting insane.
Malahini in the San Diego just today. Malahini had, I think, 3 or 4 fish hanging over 200 they were claiming. San Diego had several fish. I think it was 50 to 70 pounds. And we're talking 3/4 day. We're talking a 5 to 5 trip. Typical trips, you're looking for an 18-pound yellowtail to win jackpot. A lot of cool stuff is happening. Give us a shout at the Tackle Shop. We're more than happy to kind of fill you in on the cool stuff out there and, maybe hop on a trip with us.
Appreciate you guys tuning in.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to the next one. We'll see you.
Shake and bake.